Never ever be afraid to make some noise and get in good trouble, necessary trouble, from June 2018. And the Public Relations Society of America and its affiliated chapters, as we celebrate October, and in this case, closing it out as Global Diversity Inclusion Month, we thought today's topic of good trouble affecting change and diversifying the profession was really an important one. Statistics bear out. It said that 83% of the public relations profession is overwhelmingly white. An often heard narrative is that it is difficult for companies and organizations to find talent from communities of color. But today, our experts who we have on our panel, whom you're going to be hearing their introductions in just a moment, they say not so in response to, and they are some of the state's top recruiters and diversity and inclusion experts. And I'm going to be sharing my screen as I have some information that I'm going to be sharing with you now. An excerpt from the National Public Relations Society of America. Rather than having a definition of diversity and inclusion, they decided to go with a statement. And an excerpt from their statement is, diversity and inclusion are integral to the evolution and growth of PRSA and the public relations industry. Diversity and inclusion are defined, in their words, as proactive behaviors. Respecting, embracing, celebrating, and validating those behaviors are integral to PRSA's DNA. Diversity and inclusion are vital to the success of our profession, our members, and the communities in which we live and work. It is essential and is our responsibility as members of the society to carry this forward. And another quote that I thought was really very good, and it comes from Deidre O'Donoghue. She's Senior Content Marketing Specialist at G2. She said, public relations professionals represent people and brands from all different backgrounds and cultures. Clients can be local and even global, and they look for PR that is reflective of this. Forward-thinking and diversity-focused communications are critical to the PR industry, and anyone who doesn't prioritize diversity will lose clients and any valuable relationships. Let us sit on that for just a moment. I'd like to share with you also, I'm moving my screen, moving the images back and forth. I'd like to share with you also a little bit about my role as Diversity and Inclusion Officer. Minnesota PRSA determined after much reflection and research and speaking with leadership in the community that the time had come to have a diversity and inclusion officer. So in January 2019, I was appointed. And what you will find on our website is that part of the reason and what my role is that we are in alignment with the National PRSA standards and best practices for diversity and inclusion, and also for the visibility of the role. And what our chapter does is of the D&I standards, resources, and best practices for the following dimensions of diversity at all levels of the organization, meaning Minnesota PRSA: racial, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, gender, culture, skills, and mindset. Now on to our panel, who we have today. We have as our facilitator, Kendall Harkness, who is Assistant Managing Editor of Diversity and Community for the Minneapolis Star Tribune. I'll share with you a bit of her bio in just a moment. Our panelist, Sharon Smith Akinsanya, she's CEO, Ray McKenzie Group and founder of People of Color Careers. Miguel Purvis McMore, she's founder and president KP Companies. And Angel Udine, Director of Diversity and Inclusion, Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota. Now, here's what we would like for you to do. This is not going to be the kind of forum where we just talk at you, but we want you to engage. And we will have, for today, you'll hear from our panelists. There'll be a discussion. There'll be breakout sessions, and then we're going to reconvene, and we're going to share what we learned in the breakout sessions before we break up at noon. Here are the social media handles that we'd love for you to engage on social media with the discussion. And we'll be sharing these social media handles throughout the morning. And one final thing before I introduce Kendall and turn it over to her is that we must thank our sponsors, because without them, none of our program programming would be possible. Nuger, Brandpoint, Weber Shandbook, and Padilla. So thank you to our sponsors and thank you to all of you. And now I would like to introduce to you our facilitator of the morning, Kendall Harkness. Kendall recently began her new role as Assistant Managing Editor of Diversity and Community at the Minneapolis Star Tribune. Before stepping into this job, she was a photo editor for more than 5 years and coordinated coverage of the Ryder Cup, 2 Olympics, the Super Bowl, Final Four, and breaking news such as Prince's death and occupations and protests after police shootings. Before assuming this position, she spent more than 2 decades as a photojournalist, working 15 years at the Star Tribune, covering communities across the state. She has taught as a photo instructor at the high school journalism program called J Camp for more than 15 years that champions diversity of voices. She is also truly a part of the sandwich generation, living with her son who is 10 and her mother who is 82. So at this point, I am going to turn the program over to Kendall Harkness and have her take it away. Kendall is going to be introducing our panelists, our esteemed panel, who I'm just so excited and so honored to have them joining us this morning and to share with all of you. Kendall, I turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, everyone. I hope you guys are doing well on this okay day. If you guys want to, it might be easier to turn to speaker view so you can see folks. Sometimes gallery view, I think, will probably be useful when you guys are in your breakouts, but speaker view is probably good for right now so you can see us in full effect. So I wanted to start this off with us taking a moment and thinking about how we got to this point. We're in these boxes for a reason because of the pandemic. And then because we were forced to pause and we were able to take a moment and fully understand what happened Memorial Day with Mr. George Floyd. I think that places all around the US, if not around the world, have looked around themselves and recognized that something needed to change. So every industry, even at my newspaper, we've taken a look at the systems that are in place and know that something needs to shift. And I think before, lots of people were just quiet. I think we were quiet so long that we had forgotten how to speak. And I think George Floyd's death allowed us the opportunity to really look at things in a real way and how our society plays to the benefits of others and to the detriment of others. So you guys are here for a reason. You're here to not keep the status quo, but you're here to learn how to move us forward, change, shift towards equity. And we have a group of panelists that will help us get to those points so that we can look around ourselves and be able to have the culture that allows for diversity to happen, and to be able to find those folks who, once we fix our houses, can help us grow in the way that we need to grow. So I'm gonna introduce our panelists. We've got first Sharon Smith Akinsanya. She is a CEO of Ray McKenzie Group, an award-winning diversity, equity, and inclusion marketing firm, and the author of a forthcoming book called Colorful: Competitive Strategies to Attract and Retain Top Talent of Color. She recently launched People of Color Careers Social Hiring Network to help top employers build more authentic relationships with people of color. We also have Angel Udine. She leads diversity, equity, inclusion efforts at Blue Cross and Blue Shield of Minnesota. She has more than 3 decades of experience in leading and leadership development, business strategy, project management, and conflict resolution. She is qualified administrator of intercultural development inventory and a certificate in life coaching. She is a board member and co-chair of the DEI committee at Neighborhood House, a nonprofit multicultural, multi-service agency based in St. Paul. And she's an active member of the Greater MSP Enterprise team and the Twin Cities Diversity Inclusion Roundtable. Udine works collaboratively with other diversity and inclusion practitioners to focus on racial equity. And last but definitely not least, we've got Miguel Purvis McMore. She is president and owner of KP Companies. She capitalizes on her gift for bringing mid-career and executive level candidates and corporations together. Established in 2000, the company places top-notch professionals and executive talent with multinational US Fortune 500, mid-size, and small companies such as United Health Group, Medtronic, Anderson Windows, and Seven Sigma, just to name a few. Because McMore's knack for getting into places with big companies, her placement ratio is high. 1 out of every 3 candidates her team represents to its clients gets placed. So that's powerful. So these women know how to get it done. So I think we should start off with some questions here. So I think this question will be for you, Sharon. Marcia at the start talked about how the profession of public relations is overwhelmingly white. We're talking about 83%. And I think anecdotally, we've heard, especially even in my field, that it's hard to find people of color that are talented, that can do the job. I want to hear from you. Do you think that's true?
Good morning, Kendall. Thank you so much. Really glad to be here with everybody. You know, in the work that I do at the Ray McKenzie Group, working with top corporations, helping them position their brands to attract and recruit top talent of color, it is something that I hear. We just don't know where to go. We can't find them. And that has to do with our narrow networks. You see, as white people, and I'm hoping that we're in a place where we can have safe, open, and honest conversations, and this is how we learn and grow. But as white people, and it's nobody's fault, you can really go your entire career in life and not have a network or a set of friends that don't look like you. And so what tends to happen is our networks remain narrow. So we tend to hire and recruit from who we know. And so we tend to continue to build departments and workplaces that are not diverse. So what we have to do is expand the networks. And so the reason why recruiting managers and hiring managers are having a tough time is because if you look at the statistics, referrals are a big way we all get our jobs. So if you don't know anybody that doesn't look like you, then we continue to do the same thing over and over again. So what we have to do is to be committed to identify and find those professionals of color so that you can have an increased candidate pool of those who are applying for the jobs. And that's why you need to make sure you have an awesome network. So no, it's not true. Clearly, professionals of color are out there in all industries. And we have to just do a better job at making sure that we have recruiters inside of our organization that understand how to network, build relationships with, add to their friend base, add to their resource list, so that they can go out and identify and find those professionals. So places, you know, whether it's with Miguel or with me, you know, clearly there are professionals and experts all over who can help you change that dynamic. But my number one piece of advice is to expand your narrow network.
Angel, do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd be happy to expound upon that. One of the things that we've been doing, and I encourage others to do as well, is you can't just look when you have a need. You actually have to develop those relationships, garner the trust, garner the appreciation for what your organization is about, what it stands for, build your brand in communities and in networks before you have the open position and before you're seeking that top talent. So people like myself, Sharon, and Miguel, ironically, all three of us know each other well before this because we have networked amongst ourselves. And when those positions come about, we have the ability to reach out to each other and say, hey, I've got this position and I'm really looking for some strong talent for. The other thing is we've got to be unconventional. We've got to not look at career fairs and college recruiters and things of that nature as an exclusive way in which to build that network. But there are a lot of professional associations that are out here in the marketplace, both regionally as well as nationally, that we can tap into. We've got a lot of sororities and fraternities that are really very powerful in community activism and making sure that they get their people placed in positions. So to Sharon's point, you have to look more broadly, you have to look more creatively, and you've got to build those relationships before you have the need.
Yeah. Miguel, do you have anything you want to add to that, or?
No, I absolutely agree. And I think it's very, very well said. I think that because we do this every day, all day, we're constantly building pipelines. And I think that ability to build pipelines of talent and to be trusted is key. I think that a lot of times people go and connect with people they trust and they know are going to move with their best interest in mind. So I think even just the ability to communicate and communicate authentically, courageously, and let people know where you stand, whether you're proud of that or not, helps people to better understand you. And then you can start developing a better relationship from there. So I would add that just authenticity and that level of trust as well.
No, it's really important. Just in terms of, let's talk a little bit about retention. How do folks keep, once they've done the recruiting piece, how do they keep them in the door, especially for folks who are, if you're recruiting from out of state, how do you keep people in once you get them?
Yeah, I don't know who you want to go first, but
yeah, go Sharon, go ahead.
That's a big problem. You know, when I moved here, you know, nearly 30 years ago, I didn't plan to stay. You know, I moved here and ended up working for Prince, and he told me, he says, you'll never leave, you'll fall in love. You know, I did fall in love because I saw the opportunity, right? But it wasn't because I was so well connected. I had to create a network from the bottom up, but I saw the opportunity because we had so many awesome Fortune 500 companies here. I'm like, who can make a decent living here, right? But I was very concerned that I wasn't going to get married or have a baby or, you know, have any of that, you know, have a good girlfriend. I was concerned, you know, so I went through drastic measures. You know, I ended up opening up a nightclub so that I can build a relationship with people. But I believed in the Twin Cities, so I did go through drastic measures. It is a problem. You know, we are not doing a really good job at making sure that we're reaching out to people and making those relationships, particularly inside of corporations. I mean, we got to make sure that we are caring. I mean, I'm concerned about everybody over the holiday when you didn't come here. Are we inviting people? Who's on the list? Who are we having lunch with? Are we really thinking about everybody? Do you have a buddy? You know, so it's a problem, and we haven't nailed this system internally inside the corporations. We talk about it a lot, but we haven't nailed it. And I think we all just need to do a better job of reaching out. We need some sort of system, a relay system. You know, it's like, okay, we moved in. The first person you call is Angel. Then you call, then you call Miguel. Then you call. I mean, we need something because it is a problem, and our top candidates are being poached just from other companies that are right here in our own backyard. So we do have to figure out a way, to build a stronger relationship. So on my platform, we built something called the We Don't Want to Lose You portal. So that if you don't want to tell the bosses that you're having a problem at work, you can fill out a ticket on the platform and talk to one of our coaches and say, what is the problem? Because I don't want to lose you. And so when I talk to them, then I turn back around and connect them back with the employer, because usually it's something that can be solved. And a lot of times it's just a hug. Do I matter? Do I value? So a lot of times it's very, very small, and we do have to figure it out. It is a problem.
Yeah. What do you think, Miguel?
Yeah, I think, from my vantage point as an executive recruiter, we look at organizations and think about their readiness, right? How ready are they to really retain diversity? Because when they call us and they want diversity, that's what we're good at. And we've been doing diversity recruitment for the last 20 years before it was even cool, right? So I would say that one of the things we talk about, and it's really very important to us, and it doesn't mean that you have to be good at this, right? We just need to try to assess honestly where you are. Yes. So we can communicate that to our candidate pool, and then they can make decisions. Everybody is different. Just because I'm a Black woman, I'm not necessarily Angel Udine, right? And I'm not Sharon Akintania. So we are all different, and we all are looking for different things within organizations. So from a retention standpoint for us, it's important that companies are deliberate and they are really looking at how well they've done, and they have data to support that and back it up, and they're measuring their retention rates. They're looking at how many people they're retaining in comparison to non-people of color. And that tells us that they're trying to be deliberate, and they're trying to make changes, and they're open to understanding, right? So when we place people, we want to place people that we think will stay with the organizations that we submit them to. So for me, it's a matter of really trying to understand where that organization is, so that I can be upfront and honest with the candidate, so that they can make their decision. And it might be a good fit. I've seen people who, I've seen a lot in the business where I'm like, ooh, I don't think I'd go to that company. But there are people who will, that are people of color and do well.
Right.
And be able to support them in their evolution through this process, because that's what it is. It's an evolution. I mean, this is slow. This is not something that's going to change overnight.
Right, absolutely. And Angel, because you are working from the inside of a company, how do you build that foundation within to make retention happen, or at least help it along?
Sure. There are a couple of factors that we're playing with, and even more now so in this virtual workforce. First of all, it's not just an internal issue, it's also an external. I'm part of the Greater MSP Enterprise team, and in 2016 or 15 as well as 2018, there was a survey that was conducted of people of color, and it asked why people come to the Twin Cities as recruits or transplants, and what makes them stay and what makes them leave. And ironically, you won't be surprised, it has absolutely nothing to do with weather. Most people think that we lose people because of where they go, because of the weather, because they go to Charlotte, they go to Atlanta, they go to Houston, they go to Chicago. But it has nothing to do with that. What it has to do with connectivity. People were feeling as if from the hours of 9 to 5, they've got a place, a position, they've got a job to do, so to speak. But then from 5 to 9, what do? Minnesota, we know we have the reputation of being Minnesota nice, and that's not really being nice, right? it's very hard for transplants to break into groups. It's very difficult for us to make connections, and people of color love that connectivity, whether it's the church, the community organizations, the girlfriends groups. Actually, I met Miguel many, many years ago through a group of girlfriends who really embraced me and brought me on board. And so through that network, I got more connected, more rooted. And that's the thing. We find the professionals of color, if they don't make those connections and get that rooting within the first 18 to 24 months, they leave the Twin Cities area. So we want to work on the external, but the other piece is the internal. If I feel as if I were recruited because of my uniqueness, my diversity, my perspective, and I get inside the organization and I become the token, and I have my culture and my uniqueness extrapolated. We have a video that is circulating around for diversity, equity, and inclusion professionals, and it's called Perry the Peacock and the Penguins. And what it really is it talks about assimilation in organizations. You hire me because I'm a peacock and my uniqueness and the diversity that I bring to the organization. So we recruit for diversity, but then we actually hire for assimilation. We make everybody just like the rest of the penguins over time, and we lose that richness in perspective and diversification. And so what we need to do internally as organizations is acknowledge that and continue to allow and nurture that uniqueness and pull upon that, because in most cases, that uniqueness reflects the customers and the communities that we serve. And if we continue to, water that down and make it more homogeneous and all of us become penguins, then our communities are all penguins as well. The customer base is all penguins. We lose that diversity. We lose some of that market share that we would otherwise gain. So what most professionals of color want to do is they want to know that their perspective is valued, that there's advancement opportunities within the organization, that there are not barriers that are put up that create glass ceilings and lock them into the position that they join the organization for, and that they can have their voices heard. When we talk about inclusion, most people say voices heard, but you have to be in the room and at the table to actually be heard. So we need to make sure that those professionals are not just being heard when they need to be summoned, but that they actually have a seat at the table, that when they speak, they're heard, their voices and their opinions are actually taken into consideration and that are grown. So those are the two things that we work at from an internal perspective as an organization versus the recruiting aspect.
Yeah, no, I think I need that video from you.
I'd be happy to share it with everyone because it's a cartoon, but it's extremely powerful.
Yeah, no, that would be great. So pandemic, George Floyd, how has that changed what you guys are doing right now? I'll stick with Angel for a second. Like, how has it changed what you're doing?
The pandemic and George Floyd really dispelled the narrative of most conservatively functioning organizations, which said that we are an in-person workforce. We can't have remote workers. We need to have everybody in the same region. We need to have them in the same city. That has opened and blown the doors off of that concept. Now we know, as our organization, as an example, we started out with only 10% of our workforce of about 3,600 associates working remotely or from home. We are now 98%. And when we begin that return to workspace process, whenever that becomes safe, we anticipate that only 45% will consider what we are calling hybrid working. And that is where they only come into the office for certain days of the week, but mostly work from home. An additional 45% will remain a virtual workforce, and only 10% will be permanently in the office. What that does is that opens up the doors for us to recruit nationally, which Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota would have never considered that in the past. But we know now that that's just a false barrier at this point. And so we're expanding that. But with that comes an extremely important factor. We have to, again, back to the retention factor, is we have to give more focus to what that looks like, because home and work have collided.
Right.
And that means that there's a lot of unintentional, unconscious bias that plays out in the workforce, and making sure that we are cognizant of those blind spots as we interact with our associates. They're different things, you know, like look at all of us. We have all of our backgrounds. You can see our homes. And so as people do that, there's some assumptions that occur when you're working with an associate. When you see the kid run behind in the background, are you assuming that that employee is not necessarily giving their full attention because there's kids in the house? Well, we never thought about that when they were working in the office, right? And we assume that that might impact performance and productivity. So this workforce is very unique now, and we have to be so much more cognizant of where those unconscious bias creep in, and also in terms of how we're recruiting and how we're retaining people. It's a totally different dynamic now.
Yeah, Sharon, let me get your opinion on that too, because as you're recruiting other people, what does that look like for them in the now?
Well, for me, it was a quick pivot because, you know, I produced one of the leading career fairs in the state called the People of Color Career Fair that we have, where we get, you know, 500-600 professionals together with awesome employers like Blue Cross Blue Shield of Minnesota, like the Star Tribune, face to face, so we can build those relationships. And, you know, because of the pandemic, you know, in April, we couldn't have it. And we thought we were going to have an epic one in October, and we can't have it. It's worse than it was in April. And so
Right.
fortunately, I was working on this proprietary platform for the past 2.5 years called People of Color Careers, which I also thought would be about our region. Well, it's instantly a national platform because of what Angel just talked about. So everybody's saying, oh no, they can work anywhere. You know, they can be in St. Louis, they can be in New York. So instantly now I have a national platform where professionals of color from all over the United States and all over the world even can make sure that they have a profile on the platform and work for a company here in the region. You know, so I went national right away. So that was the pivot for me. And you know, and been really busy having conversations, helping people get comfortable with having uncomfortable conversations with what happened between the pandemic and what happened with, you know, George Floyd. 8 minutes and 46 seconds really impacted all of us. You know, there wasn't a Timberwolves game. It wasn't a Twins game. It wasn't a Wolves game. It wasn't a hockey game. It wasn't a nothing. We were just staring at the TV in horror.
Right.
And it almost like everybody sort of just remembered that 1619 happened in this country.
Right.
When the first slaves were, you know, hit the shores of Virginia, and they forgot about American history, and they started to ask and wonder and try to figure out, which is how you opened us up, Kendall.
Yeah.
And so we have to now have these conversations to help us move through this and get on the other side. But I've had to pivot as a small business and making sure that we are still connecting with those professionals, because people are calling, want to know who's still hiring. What do I do? How do I adjust? You know, so we're adapting. We're adapting.
You have to. I'm assuming, Miguel, that you're dealing with the same thing, where your world is expanded now in terms of your scope.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we've always been a national search firm. So for us, we've had national reach for some time.
Yeah.
And it's more about how our work changed, not necessarily, you know, in terms of the business impact and that kind of stuff. The business has not been as impacted. The impact comes in, number one, how we do business, but also I think the sentiments and managing everybody's emotions around what has been learned, and really embracing that and allowing people to express that. For so long, I mean, as a woman of color led organization with most of my staff are people of color. So for so long, we have known what everybody just learned as it relates to what happened to George Floyd, right? All of us probably, you know, at Persica. So we've all known this, and we have lived with it. And unlike, you know, the late, great John Lewis, we did not necessarily speak up in this business about that. And so we were taught that the less you talked about it, the better off you are. And nobody wanted to hear that. So the demonstration of what happened with George Floyd, what it really did was gave everybody permission to mourn, to talk about it, and to really start trying to put some plans in action. So, you know, for us, we just needed to change the way we did things. We needed to embrace that, and allow people to be open and honest, regardless, and you know, embrace our ignorance. You know, there's a lot that I don't know, honestly, and I think people are scared to talk about things because they just don't know.
Sure.
And they don't want to be judged, and they don't want to be, you know, tongue lashed and all of that stuff. And sometimes, or they don't want to be shunned, and that happens, and it happens a lot. And so in our organization, it's just really important that people are able to express themselves freely, without judgment.
Is that a part of creating a diverse and inclusive work environment? Just that open and honest piece of it, like allowing people to make mistakes, to be foolish, but to also be supportive in that foolishness?
Yes.
You know, I think I will pipe in and say, you know, we had this cliche statement that said, bring your full self to work, and bring your authentic self to work, but we didn't really mean it.
Right.
We were okay with you bringing it, but when you got to the door, please park it and leave it outside. The reality is that we are now saying and meaning, and actually, quite frankly, trying to figure out what that looks like.
Right,
Those of
right.
us who are bringing our authentic self to work are now testing the waters. You know, we're trying to see if you really mean it and if it's really safe to do that. And those who are saying bring your authentic self to work are saying, wow, I had no idea. And so a lot of organizations like ours spent the first 5 months having what we call courageous conversations. And that was where you could actually talk about all those things that we were told never to talk about at work. And so we're talking about that. We're breaking down barriers. We're getting actually to learn to know each other a lot better, which really is impacting the culture and the value system within these organizations and really testing them. Are we who we say we are? And so that's probably some of the work that Miguel's doing. She's testing the waters with these organizations and saying, is all the PR and all of the propaganda that you put out about your company, is it true? Because this is going to be important as I try to bring top talent to you. Because if they get in there and they find out that it's really tokenism and you aren't really bringing your true self to work, it's going to be a problem because they're going to bounce back out. So I think that definitely is a new shift in the paradigm.
No question. You know, I spend a lot of time with the CEOs and, you know, having these conversations like, is this real? Or Memorex?
Right.
Because guess what? You know, we're saying to, you know, professionals of color who are considering where to work, if these are the things they need to look for. And, you know, and we're also saying to the employees that are already in your organization, if this isn't real, you need to identify other places to go, because you are in a position to really add value, and you deserve to be in an organization who values you, who respects you, who will put you in a position to get noticed, get promoted, and give you a fair shot. And that's where we are. And so when I have those conversations with the CEOs, you know, I get them to just, what is it? Is it, if it's not, it's good. It's cool. I just need to know what it is, because I want to be able to quote you.
Right,
You know, and the top
right.
talent is smarter now because they're doing their homework.
Yeah, they
They're
are.
asking you about what does your board makeup look? What does the
Yes,
diversity of your board look like? What is your? Can I see your diversity plan?
Yeah.
What is your demographics internally and especially in leadership? They're asking these questions, which previously that was probably taboo. Like, you're really asking for too much intimate information about my organization in an interview process. But now we're bravely saying those things and we're asking those questions, and we have got to be prepared for it. And if, like Sharon said, if it doesn't look like it should, be honest, it doesn't, but we're working on it.
Right. Just tell the truth. Just tell the truth. But it is true, and it's scary, you know. And on the platform, we're actually exposing that information on the employer profiles, you know, so that professionals can see, you know, this is what's happening at Blue Cross Blue Shield. Not that it's perfect. It's not perfect. It's like, look, this is what our plans are. It's just laying it out. So, because transparency is our friend, quite frankly.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Absolutely. I think it might be time for breakouts. So if yeah, this is the fun part. This is where you guys get to go off in rooms and actually really delve deep into discussions. There'll be discussion questions. You'll have facilitators in each room, and the panelists and I will sort of roam around. We'll check in on you guys and see if you have any questions for us, and then we'll reconvene. So is that right, Marcia? Are we on track?
Yes, we are. Thank you so very much, Kendall. I hope you all have been enjoying this conversation as much as I have this morning, and I see questions are starting to come in the chat room, and I've been trying to tweet at the same time. It's such rich content. But yes, now you're going to be going into pre-assigned breakout sessions. You will have a chance to pick the brains of each of our esteemed guests, our experts that we have today, and Kendall. They will roam from group to group, and then we'll reconvene after about 35 minutes and going to this over to our facility. And I'm a participant like all of you, as she's going to put me in someone's room. All right, back with the large group now. I hope that you have enjoyed your breakout sessions and that the rich discussion has continued. I am going to turn it back. I can't find her. Oh, there she is.
I'm here.
Yes. Turn it back over
Hey.
to our program facilitator, Kendall Harkness, and who will call on each of the spokespersons who've been selected from your breakout groups to do a share out.
I'm just gonna do one thing real quick. Since I got you guys all in these boxes, how did everything go? If it went well, do a little wave. Everybody's good? Everybody's good? Yay! Fantastic. I'm hoping that you guys learned a lot. I hope that you were able to share things with each other and things that you can bring back that help you move the needle forward, move the needle towards equity, right? So let's start with group one. Who had group one? If you can sort of share what you've learned, that would be great.
I was in group number one along with Beth and Sam, and we had some good conversations. I appreciated learning from Beth and Sam about them working on their social media algorithms and following different people to be able to get different items on their news feed. So that was something that I have not done yet, and I think I will be doing later today. And you know, yeah, I mean, a lot on recruitment and retaining. But then also to not bucket those into one thing, because so many times I think recruitment and retainment, you know, they get lumped together, and there's differences. And once you have employees, you need to be intentional as far as, you know, retaining employees, you know, once you get them. So those were a couple takeaways. And Beth and Sam, I'm not sure if there's anything else that you guys wanted to add in.
Yeah, I guess to that point, I think we realize that things keep coming back to the importance of a diverse and expanded network and the importance of authenticity. To Jake's point, you were just saying, taking into consideration both recruitment and retention as two separate things. And I remember when he said that, I was like, well, and then if we're being authentic during the recruiting process, we're recruiting for retention to begin with, right? So if you're fake during your interview process, then they're going to churn pretty quickly afterwards. And so everything we talked about, to me, just kind of trickled back into, it's important to expand your network, to have people that look differently than yourself, and important to be authentic while doing everything that you do.
All right, next we've got group three. Who's got
That's us, Rosa.
Oh, nice.
Hello. So my name is Rosa Johnson. I'm actually the current president of the University of Minnesota's PRSSA chapter. Really happy to be here with everyone. So our group talked a lot about intentionality and purpose. And so really, again, building those really authentic relationships, being intentional about who you're making those relationships with. And then I think reflecting on why you don't have those relationships and why you need to have those relationships is a really good place to start. We talked about comfortability, and Miguel actually made a really great point of, it's not necessarily a given that people of color will network with people of color, and, building that own foundation of self-reflection of why don't I, network with with these people that look like me? Why don't I push? And then being intentional about making those relationships, because, I think we can all learn so much from each other. So I think that was a big takeaway. And then Sandra from the University of Minnesota actually talked about making marketing efforts more inclusive and, taking a look at the foundation of, your plans, your strategies, your tactics, and like how to really bring in a more diverse audience, and making sure that you're targeting them and being aware that perhaps they were ignored previously, or perhaps, privilege plays into a lot of the messaging and the words that are put out, from organizations, from schools, from different places, and making sure that the language and, the frequency and all of that is mindfully inclusive of everyone.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's that's a huge part of it, because sometimes you just don't see it. And that's why it's important to have people in the room that can help you look at your language and say, did you notice that that doesn't really match it? Yeah, absolutely. Let's try group 5. Who's in group 5?
Maybe that's my group. I'm not
Yeah,
sure where I am.
Bianca.
Yeah.
I don't know what group it is. I'll just wait until somebody calls on me.
Yeah, we'll just go with it being ours. We had a really good discussion.
That's
so I'll turn it over to
fantastic.
Bianca to share.
Yeah, we covered a lot. So a lot of the same and similar themes that other groups have talked about. Really, really talked about the importance of relationships, and that that obviously building on those relationships. And selfishly, we also talked about me building my own board of directors too. Who's talking about you when you're not in the room? And to that I say I would advocate for everybody to obviously, look at your own networks, but also who are you advocating for when, when somebody's not in the room. So talked about that, but then also looking at organizations and looking at what the role of managers are, what we can be doing for our people, but then also what should we be asking of our managers as well. And so really, when you're looking to build organizations, looking at your recruiting tools, looking at your recruiting tools, seeing what pools are you pulling from, and seeing how you can build those pools so you're not scrambling at the last minute when you're looking to fill a role on your team. And lastly, I think the one big thing that we all talked about that still resonates with me, diversity means that's looking at the numbers, but inclusion is making the numbers matter. So that is one thing that I think our group just if we took away, and it's just a really, really good reminder of all of this work and why we are really doing it.
Excellent. Let's take a look at group 6. Who's in group 6?
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle, and I was in a group with Dan, Annika, and Harrison. And I think at a high level, a good theme that came out of our conversation was walking the talk. So while companies might have said that they were committed to diversity and inclusion in the past, now there's a hyper-focused lens on it, and companies are actually making steps to move forward with it. Another thing that we talked about is that we're all kind of in a learning stage right now. So how can we expand our networks? We all are in the phase of following different accounts that we maybe typically wouldn't have on social media. And I mean, it's an introductory step to learning about these things, but that's the phase that we're in right now. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Right on, right on. Yeah, it's all about learning. Everybody's trying to, I mean, it's all of our jobs to continue to be learning, to continue to be students of life and of the people that surround us. So it's all good. It's all good. Let's try group 10. Who's got group 10? Oh.
Hi, that was my group. I was with Ben and Amanda. One of the questions Ben asked, I think, is something that it really applies to a lot of people. A lot of people, I think, have a lot of empathy for people of color during this time, and are more tuned into the effects that systemic racism and inequity have. Is, you know, how do I help move the needle? How do I show up for my Black coworkers, for my Black friends? And Sharon gave a really good answer, which was ACT. You know, like if your company has a diversity and inclusion board, join it. If you have the opportunity to be a vocal ally, you know, step up and take that. And she said something really powerful that I loved, which is this point about showing up for your Black employees and checking in on them during this time. You know, a lot of Black people are really, I mean, we're tired, you know, this is a lot of trauma has been sitting on our shoulders, and this isn't something we ever have the luxury of walking away from. And sometimes just that call, that conversation, that check-in, how are you doing? There isn't an expectation that you have all the answers or that you are going to go into some granular discussion, but just that base human empathy of how are you doing? You know, how can I show up for you? Another thing I really liked, I asked from the perspective, you know, if you are a professional of color and you're in a situation where you are hearing outdated language, or, you know, you're still experiencing microaggressions, how do you, in this new kind of a national moment that we're inhabiting, how can we step forward and start having these conversations now that a window and opportunity exists that didn't exist previously? And she talked about asking permission. You know, if you are asking for honesty and you want my honest opinion, I need you to know that I'm going to give that. If you want an unvarnished take on my experiences and you want to hear about my pain and my frustrations, understand that that is going to come, there's some emotionality to that. There's a lot that is going on. And I also asked Kendall the same question, and she talks about the importance of identifying white allies, finding those that you work with, or finding those, you know, in your personal or professional circle that you can depend on and that you know will help you create that safe space, and those who will go to bat for you when you're having these conversations about, you know, racism and inequity, or just race in the workplace.
Awesome. Good discussions. You guys were having fun in there. Let's go to group 11. Group 11.
Hi, I'm Leah. I was the facilitator for group 11, so I'm going to turn it over to my friend Mo Schreiner to give our report out. But we were lucky enough to have Miguel in our breakout room for a little bit too. And just shout out to Rosa. I'm the mother of 2 gophers. Got my gopher hoodie on today, so Sky Yuma. And Kendall, I also wanted to ask, I told Mo she was going to be able to ask the panelists questions. So do you want us to save our questions till we're done with report outs?
Yeah, you can save your questions to the report outs, yeah.
Okay, Mo, take it away.
Okay, so the takeaway, the one takeaway that I thought was the most valuable was we were asking Miguel how you bring your real self to work, and especially in these, you know, weird, you know, remote situation times. Sorry, I've got a vicious dog in the background. That is my one way. So she hates rabbits, and I'm sure that's what's happening right now. So hang on for just a second.
I'll buy you some time, Mo, because I was going to say that same here. My dog beat down my office door, so we're in the same boat.
Yeah. So sorry about that. That's the way life is. But anyway, Miguel shared that the thing that she talked about, she's like, well, you know, it's informal. She says, we have this grace period at the beginning of a meeting where it's like, it's 5 minutes where it's like, yep, we know you're finishing up some other meeting. In those 5 minutes, you got 5 minutes, you better get here. But the people show up where it's like, you got this grace period where you're going to have an informal conversation about how's your life going? I want to know what happened to you on the weekend, you know, and it's the other thing too, is this whole idea of that, you know, having one-on-one conversations with people about that is important too. And that's what Lee and I talked about in terms of, you know, really, you know, reaching out and, you know, and Clayton, by the way, it's great to see you. And that it is that idea about building relationships one-on-one so that people feel comfortable. One of the things I want to share, by the way, that I remembered as someone was having this conversation is I actually worked on a contract basis one time with a guy who does the governance center, and he works a lot with building corporate boards and boards for NGOs, nonprofits. And he talked about why corporate boards don't have women. And it's not because they don't have the skills. It's also not even because they don't have the network. Actually, I mean, there's lots of men now who know lots of competent women. He said it's actually the women do not feel comfortable. So it has a lot to do with comfort level. And I'm sure that, you know, in terms of diversity, and I guess that was one of the questions I'm going to end up going back to with Kendall and the panel is, it's like, you know, how to build those comfort levels. Because I do think this idea of feeling comfortable, you know, especially in Minnesota, where we're Minnesota nice, you know, it's like, you know, you got to get to a level where there's an actual comfortable, yeah, this person gets me, or they're not going to judge me, or you know, not really include me because of that. So anyway, that was the grace period, and the one-on-ones was the two takeaways.
Oh, it's fantastic. I think wait, were you guys group 11? Did we do group 11 yet?
Yeah, that was
okay.
That was us.
So the last but not least would be the main room. There was group in the main room. So who's got that?
So that was us, and Amy Franchi is going to do our readout.
Sure. All right. Well, we had, you know, similar discussions at parts what other people were discussing here. And one thing we talked about was growing leadership. You know, when you want to hire and really retain people, leadership needs to look at people as individuals and with individual needs. They could vary. And instead of treating everyone as needing the same things, you know, in terms of resources within the company or whatever it is going on, just having different needs. Another thing is that, you know, we did talk extensively on the retention part of hiring. And, you know, do we really mean it when we say that we want people to bring their true self to work? I mean, is that authentic? Is it real? Will we be punished if we request some time off to take care of ourselves or our families? You know, is that authentic? So during the interviewing process, we think it's important that people ask, you know, how are you recruiting and retaining talent? What about if we see any ethics violations or any violations to the D&I mission? Is there a way to report it anonymously, safely, and effectively? And are those taken seriously at the company? Also, it's very important to build trust and, you know, build relationships and trust before hiring. Companies need to do this, but how do we go about this? How do we make it happen? How do we establish these types of relations? And there were some other things, but those were some of the key points. Did I miss anything, Brooke, that you think I should?
No, I think you covered it really well. Thank you.
Well, fantastic job, guys. Seems like you guys were doing some nice work and really listening to each other and really trying to think about things in different ways. And that was the purpose of this all, so that you guys have an opportunity to really delve deep and be able to bring things back to your companies and sort of be the light for those companies as you move forward. So questions. Did somebody, I know Mo, you had a question.
Yeah, so actually what Lee and I talked about, and this is a public relations question to start with a journalist and then some recruiting people, is, you know, part of, you know, making people feel included is visuals. And since you are you know, your basis is photojournalism,
right?
You know the tokenism photos that come out about people of color, right?
Right.
Which, you know, I gotta say, I mean, and you know what, I worked for 7 years at a university where it's like, you gotta stop these tokenism, you know, here's this Black person in this picture, you know, I mean, it was
Like,
just,
hey,
I'm
carry the
happy to
backpack.
see
Yeah.
that, I know. And so what kind of visuals work, right? I mean, what works for visuals for inclusivity?
Well, I mean, it's one of those, it is a hard thing because usually everybody's headed to iStock, right? When they're building something for their, you know, company brochure. I think if you,
well, I mean, you've got websites and social media now too. You know what I mean? I mean, there's a lot of different platforms.
Right. I think it's authentic stories. I think, again, we have to move our needle towards authenticity. And if the people that you're either photographing or presenting with either websites or on social media have a story, an actual success story from that university or that place, then it's real. It's when you don't, it's when that's not authentic and you're just taking images or taking pictures or taking stories and then sort of melding things together in the hopes to feel authentic, right? Or to kind of represent who you are. I think that's that piece. When it's honest and it's real, then I think you can do those things. If there's only one person, if there's only one person of color in your organization, and they're the only person that's a part of your, and you put them on your brochure information, then that's misleading. So you also have to think about that. Like, if yeah, that's my, it has to be real.
Yeah, I think it's tricky, Mo. I hear what you're saying, but, and this is just my point of view, I'd rather see imagery that focuses on being inclusive versus no diversity. Like, to me, like, a total lack of diversity or representation is just kind of not acceptable anymore because it's not the real world, you know? Yeah.
Well, unless I mean, Kendall's point about, it's like, you know, if you do really have an organization where it's like, yep, well, because I've been on this with women, right? I've been in, or I'm part of a board right now where I'm the only woman, you know, and I'm sure you've been in many meetings where it's like, you know, you're the only person of color.
Yep.
So then is your authentic story where you like people to say, it's like, yep, go ahead and talk about it, of being, you know, the only person in the room who's the only person of color, right? That's the authentic story.
Yeah.
This is Marcia. Love to hear from Sharon and Angel and Miguel, because as individuals who recruit and you work with various corporations, I know that if I'm being recruited by a company and I go to the website, what I'm going to see is very important. So Sharon, you do a lot with branding, and Miguel and Angel would love to, we have a few minutes left, so would just love to hear from you in terms of the question that Mo has posed, and how external content is really critical to whether or not you can get a person on board who's of color.
You know, I'll say, first of all, don't use stock photo, because we've all seen it. We know what it looks like. And you blow the impression right off the bat when you do that. And so I've encouraged our teams in my previous place of employment, get the real people. And if you don't have a lot of them, they are what they are. You shouldn't be ashamed of it. You know, tell your story and tell about how you're trying to expand that. And, you know, don't use that one Black person in every picture that the word diversity shows up. Talk about other things. Talk about diversity of thought. Talk about diversity of experience. Talk about your community engagement and your philanthropic activities that go beyond the individuals in the organization. You're multifaceted. You are more than just those individuals. And be honest about where your deficits are and how you're trying to grow, because that's the reason why you want them. But be very cognizant of the fact, back to my Perry and the Peacock, don't try to recruit them to turn them into a penguin. So I think that you just have to be cognizant of that. And Sharon, you do an excellent job with your marketing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So I agree with what Angel said. We're all aspirational, you guys. This journey's not done yet, and people can see through it. So it's all about the story and how you position yourself on that social media, on your website, on your internal communications. And it is what it is, meaning, if you don't give us a shot, right, at considering a career opportunity with us, we will always look like this. Mm-hmm. So it's really making sure you have experts on your team, or even external partners like myself or Miguel or others who can really help you position, package, and present yourself in the marketplace to tell the accurate story, so you don't get caught up in that, whether it's stock imagery or whatever. It's about the story. So what is your CEO talking about? What is your leaders of your DEI councils talking about? What is, like Angel said, it's more than that. But we have to get the message out about what our intentions are. And communication and authenticity is very important. And then we can always, we can think about video, that's having stories of video, and here's what we want to be. It's all sorts of ways to position things in the marketplace, but it needs to be authentic. But you need experts to support that.
And sometimes it's actually saying to that potential candidate, we need you because it looks like this, and we need your perspective so we can grow it to the next stage, instead of pretending that you've got something that you don't. I had a candidate once who was blind, and she had a seeing eye dog, and she sent me a message, and I was working with her to coach her for employment, and she said, should I crop the dog out of my picture? I said, well, will the dog go to the interview with you? Will the dog be present when you do the job? And she said, yes. I said, so why would you want to work for an organization that doesn't appreciate the dog? Well, the same is true. Do you think when I get in there and to the organization and I don't see anybody that looks like me, I'm not going to notice that there's nobody that looks like me? So own it up front, because eventually if I come on board, I'm going to discover you were a fraud. So just be honest.
Miguel, did you?
No, I absolutely agree. And it's how people interpret these images. Back to, Mo was talking about how does this imagery count? It's for me, I see how people interpret it. And that's one aspect of an organization, as indicated by the comments of both Sharon and Angel. So, and I think that it's appreciated when people do show, again, pictures of real people within the organization versus photo stock. But I think the most important thing is finally when you get face to face with the leader and who you're going to connect with, is there some type of connection? But my expertise is not the imagery. That's Sharon.
We all do pretty well. We know what to do. Thank you.
All right. Are there any other questions?
I have a question. I was going to ask this in our breakout session, Kendall, but I didn't get a chance to. But one thing that I've been thinking about a lot is, obviously, at the Star Tribune and a lot of the companies where there have been vocal and public pledges to do more to, look at what are we doing in the D&I space and things like that. For those who have been kind of those gatekeepers, or, those who have gone to leadership and said, we need to change this. In terms of holding those leaders accountable, how does that, or what does that look like now, or how is that changing? Because, one thing that I've thought about is, and I think this has happened in the past, but, go to leaders and say, we need to, make these changes. And whether it falls on deaf ears or their work starts and then stops and there's no progress, what does, now that we're in this moment, how does accountability change in terms of holding the people responsible for these decisions? What is that going to look like?
Yeah. No, it's an excellent question. I mean, that was some of the questions that folks were having in our process. Like, how are we going to hold management accountable, and how are we going to measure success, right? So it's all about making sure that there are goals set for 2021. There are going to be goals set before the end of the year, and there's going to be conversation, but there has to be accountability. And so part of that is like making sure that we take a look at our diversity inside and out in terms of our coverage, and then in terms of employees and how that works. But that has to be public. There has to be some kind of diversity audit that comes out by the end of the year. And I think, this is the beauty of social media at this point, right? For the Star Tribune, we were semi-public, I would say, in terms of telling about our story, in terms of, making solutions. But there are other news organizations that were very public and very ugly. And I'm sure that is not what the Star Tribune wants at this moment. So they're open and listening and moving. And it's that momentum that we're going to keep on working on pieces of it and changing some of the systems around what we do. And it is about that public diversity audit that's going to happen next year. So it's just keeping things in the public. So let's say our company decides that, oh, we're really not interested in doing this anymore. Oh, it's too expensive. Oh, stuff is happening. We're in crisis mode. Blah, 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 blah. There are those public levers that you can say. It's like, look, our newspaper promised these things and it's not happening. And then let the public opinion do what it does at that point. So there is leverage in that. That we've been sort of lucky that we haven't had to pull those levers as much as others have around the country, but it's possible. And I think they understand that. And they understand, sort of the cancel culture, if you call it, and it's out there for use, but it's not necessarily need to be used. I don't know, but I think there's a healthy fear around that allows for forward momentum. It's just how that works.
Well, hey, Kendall, can I ask you a question around that in terms of like the Tribune and accountability? Because I know this question comes up.
And if I can just jump in very quickly, Mo, because we're just about at time. So if you ask Kendall this question, and then we're going to have to get ready to wrap.
So this is a specific action item in terms of what I've seen with the Star Tribune is when you're online is that you don't require people who make comments to stories to be listed as people. They get to list their handle.
Right.
Just sort of wondering, because that'd be a good example where, because sometimes, as you know, the conversations online there, they get kind of nasty sometimes. Yeah.
They do.
Right.
Yeah. It's looking at all those things about making sure that, that people are identified so they don't. There are a lot of stories that we just don't allow commenting on because it's because people get nasty. But yeah, we have to look at all the aspects of how we do and how we communicate to other folks, or how folks are communicating with us, and making sure that those are equitable. And, like I said, it's 150 years. So there's like a huge process of moving those ships and finding those places where you can make the fixes that need to happen. So. I'm going to leave it at that. Marcia, did you need to? I was watching the clap. I'm like, okay, I'm going to cut this crook.
Thank you. I'm going to much to our three panelists. If you can leave each of us very quickly, briefly, with 3 points that we can implement immediately, that everybody can walk away with.
I'll start. I'll say expand your network, get uncomfortable, lean into it. It takes effort, it takes energy. So just lean into it. Take that first leap. It's sort of like, jumping into the jump rope, jump. The second one is to do it with authenticity. Don't fake it. Be who you are, whatever that looks like, and encourage your organizations to do the same, especially right now, because guess what? We see everybody's underwear drawer now. So let's just be honest. Let's be who we really are. And then finally, don't overthink it. It's just really about being good people, being good humans. That's really what this is all about. It's not some kind of newfangled something that needs a fancy label. Just be a good person.
Sharon?
Yeah, first of all, I want to thank you guys for having me. This was awesome. Thank you for sharing a bit of your extra time. And this was just a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, I'm going to always advocate for expanding your narrow network. So I'm going to always, so you got to do that. So I'm going to roll with Angel on that. And then secondly, really, get clear about what it is that you want to see in your workplace, in your business, in your world, and take some steps to influence your own little corner of the world like Cinderella, okay? To make that change. You can do it. So get clear about what you want to see happen and make it happen, and get allies and those around you that can help you get it done. And I think number 3, I'm gonna go with a little bit of what Angel said, but you've got to make sure you're having conversations with your leaders. This is not that complicated. One of the things that Prince taught me years ago was, Sharon, just make a decision, will you? It's like, can you just decide? If you decide, it'll be a lot easier. And I think that we're overcomplicating, and I really do. We just need to decide what we want our workplaces to look like, feel like, be like. And then we'll be okay. And then our leaders need to help us make that happen, because nothing happens unless our leaders from the top really are endorsing these things and pushing it from the top. That's very important. So thank you again.
Thank you. Miguel.
Sorry, I was having trouble getting off mute. So of course, I am gonna agree with the expand your network. I mean, specifically, go out there, make an effort like every week, like set some objectives for yourself every week. Let me reach out to somebody who I wouldn't otherwise connect with in my network. I'm going to reach out with one person a week outside of my, ethnic group, racial group, functional area, however you want to do it. Expand your network and make it happen. Set a goal and achieve it. I'd also probably say the authenticity piece for me is huge. Because I have learned that I need to just show up who and how I am and be okay with it, and be okay that I'm not somebody else and that I am who I am, whether you like it or not. That's who you need to just show up as and embrace it. Because what it does is allows other people to show up who they are as well. And finally, speak your truth. This is in the words of John Lewis. He says, speak your truth to power. I know Amanda asked a question earlier, about holding companies accountable and being accountable. You've got to be able to speak up and get in the way when you feel like your company is not being accountable. And if you don't want to do it alone, there are numbers in power. There are power in numbers, excuse me. You connect with other people who feel the same way you do, because I'm sure there are, and just speak up and get in the way. So that would be me.
Thank you. Kendall Harkness, Miguel McMore, Angel Udine, and Sharon Smith Akinsanya, thank you so very much
Yeah.
today, finger snaps and everything. This has been so rich. I have a couple of housekeeping things I need to remind you of. First of all, we are going to be sending you a survey. Please take the time to complete it. We want to hear your feedback and what we can continue to do in the future. There is a multicultural scholarship program of which, an endowed multicultural scholarship program of which Minnesota PRSA, we were the inaugural donors. We spread the word about that. We need to help educate our future multicultural students. Want to thank our sponsors again. I want to thank our chapter president, Dan Hauser, our incoming president, Jennifer Baghdad, and all of my committee who helped me today. I think I covered everything, and if I didn't, the resources. We are going to have the recording of today's session on our website, minnesotaprsa.org, and all of the resources that you've heard about, and we have some links to some other resources as well. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Go forth and have a great weekend. I think I covered it all.